the Roots of the Science podcast with your girl, Anne with an E. Hello everyone and welcome back to episode 47. Can you see the 50th episode? It's so close. I am so excited. As usual, a reminder that if you want to start your own podcast, I highly recommend using Buzzsprout as your podcast host. You can find a link to start your own one right here in the show notes. So do click and you can also help support the show. In that case, let's get into today's episode. Today is Anna Ampaw, who is of Ghanaian descent, living in Canada. In this episode, we learned that Anna actually wanted to be a dentist. She will explain further that her academic journey was not straight and narrow, and unfortunately, the dentist dream did not come to pass. Currently, a chemistry PhD student at the University of Ottawa in Canada, her research focuses on synthesizing small molecular carbohydrates for the purpose of decreasing cell damage during cryopreservation. We get into understanding this fascinating research, and Anna clears up any misconceptions that those sci-fi movies might have taught us about cryopreservation. Apart from that, she's also working on her own individual outreach project for women in STEM that are either in undergrad, graduate, or young professional level, and she hopes to execute this project in 2020 in Ghana. Linking to this, we discuss the importance of Africans, especially those in the diaspora, to come back to Africa and assist in projects for the advancement of other Africans in their home country. Tune in to hear about all of this and so much more. Let's go. Hi, Anna. Welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you for having me.
I am so glad to have you and for everybody out there to get to know more about you and everything that you do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so, just to kick things right off, please may you briefly introduce yourself. So, where you're from, where you're currently based, and what are you currently doing?
Sure. So my name is Anna Ampaw. I am 28 years old, and I'm currently based in Canada, in the capital city, Ottawa. And I'm a PhD student. I'm in my fourth year. And I go to the University of Ottawa. So that's the university in the capital city of Canada. And I'm doing my PhD in chemistry.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you so much for that brief introduction. Before we get into all of that, I usually like to get to know my guests, away from the science. I know you're quite musical. In fact, you play the piano. Can you please tell us about this? Are you good, like proper good?
I wouldn't call myself musical. I feel like that's a stretch. But I do play the piano. So I started playing when I was 7 years old, and my parents put me in piano lessons. And I remember I hated it at the beginning because when your parents force you to do something because they're like, oh, I want my child to be like the next Mozart or something. So they put me, my sister and I, in piano lessons, and I hated it at first. And luckily, we moved from the city that I started piano lessons in. And so after we moved, finding another piano teacher in the city that we moved to, we couldn't find one. So I stopped for a very, very long time. And then in undergrad university, I made a friend who was this amazing pianist, amazing, could play classical music, all kinds of genres. And he was actually studying music at a university. And just watching him play made me want to pick up the skill again. So because he was my friend, I was able to get piano lessons from him. And he's actually still teaching me today. It's great. It's one thing that I love doing aside from school. It's something I love doing in my downtime. And I love music too, all types of genres of music. So yeah.
That's so interesting. I find it funny that sometimes these things that our parents make us do later on when we grow up, you're like, actually, maybe they were onto something.
Exactly. And you actually get appreciative. It's thanks, mom and dad.
Thank you. They're always right, even though we don't want to admit it all the time. So bringing it back to when you grow up, you touched on that briefly. Can you just walk us through some of the influences that actually got you into this wonderful world of of STEM, like how do you end up being, Anna the chemist? Because I know that's your handle on on Twitter, so you can catch her on that handle. How did that even happen?
Yeah, so I would say it first started with my sister because my parents aren't scientific people at all. They didn't take science. My dad was in finance for all of his life, and my mom was in home economics kind of thing. So she sews. She's a seamstress, dressmaker, fashion designer. And so I know my mom always says, "Oh, the reason why you're in science is because I took science back in the day," but I really don't owe it to that. I mean, as long as I knew her, she was never in science, but rather I would owe it to my sister. My sister is older than me by 2 years. So growing up, I always just looked up to her just naturally. Like everything she did, I did. So I even started reading at a very early age because she started reading. So I started reading, I think at like 2, almost when I was 2.
Wow.
Because when my dad started teaching her how to read, I just kind of joined along for the ride and I learned how to read too. And I remember ever since that she was little, she always wanted to be a doctor. That was like her dream. She wanted to be a doctor. And so because of that, she just like really took sciences all throughout school. Even like high school, her majors were in science. And so I never really was certain what I wanted to do. I always bounced back and forth. Like I remember at one point in my life, I wanted to be a police officer. Another point in my life, I wanted to be a lawyer.
Yeah.
And so I just kind of took courses here and there. But in high school, I did take science. And I think it was probably because my sister took science. So again, I was just following in her footsteps. And I realized that I actually really liked it. I actually really enjoyed science to the point where I decided that I wanted to be a dentist. That was like my lifelong dream. And the plan for me and my sister was to have our own like medical practice where she would be a doctor and I would be a dentist, and we would have this huge franchise and make tons of money. And that was our dream, you know? But unfortunately it didn't happen like that because I'm not a dentist today, obviously. And my sister took a different route in life too. But I would probably say I owe it all to my sister being in science.
So that's so sweet that your sister played a very important role into getting you into the science. And I love it how you keep on bringing up that you looked up to her. Clearly, it shows that you guys have a pretty close relationship. It's unfortunate that the practice didn't quite work out. But hey, everything happens for a reason.
Exactly.
And here you are. Now, before we get into your PhD, I know that your academic journey wasn't one that was actually like straight and narrow. In fact, you had several like bumps along the road, which is pretty interesting. I want you to talk us through some of those bumps. Can you talk us through those bumps and then tell us how you managed to overcome those little setbacks?
So like I mentioned earlier, I wanted to be a dentist. That was my lifelong dream. And everything that I did up until like even through undergrad was trying to prepare myself to get into dental school. So the way it works in Canada is that you do your undergrad in a specific type of science. And so I did mine in biopharmaceutical science. And with that program, I was able to have all the courses that I needed to apply into dental school. And so typically you finish undergrad, or you can even apply to dental school in like your 3rd or your 4th year. And then after your undergrad, if you get admitted to dental school, then you go to dental school, you finish that, you become a dentist. And so that was kind of the way I wanted my life to go. And so, like I said, during undergrad, I took all the courses. I made sure I got good grades. I even shadowed a dentist for some time too, just to kind of confirm that this is what I wanted to do. And when I was shadowing him, I was like, yeah, this is definitely what I wanted to do. It's so interesting. Like I had this weird obsession with teeth. I was like, oh my gosh, teeth are so cool. I love to like, help people have a perfect smile, like all that kind of stuff. And so after undergrad, I applied to dental school and to pretty much all the dental schools in Canada, for which I think there's about 8. And unfortunately, I didn't get into anything, not even an interview, nothing.
Wow.
And I remember that summer after I graduated, I was like so depressed because I couldn't find a job anywhere. And it didn't get it. Like I had no plan of what I wanted to do because I didn't get in and I didn't have a backup plan. And I remember there was one day I was on the bus and I saw one of my uncles and he was just talking to me, asking about like what I was doing and stuff. And so I told him my situation and he was like, well, why don't you just pursue a graduate study degree, you know, and maybe that will better your chances to get into dental school. So I was like, okay, that's a good option. And so it's funny because this was maybe in like August of the year that I graduated. And so in August, I remember after we had that conversation, I went home, I quickly searched, okay, what do I want to do? And I remember I really liked organic chemistry from undergrad and I always excelled at it. I always did very, very well. And that's a course that a lot of people don't do well and a lot of people hate, but for some reason, I just loved it, you know? And so I was like, okay, because I love it and I did a co-op position in an organic chemistry lab, and I remember I loved the hands-on kind of stuff as well. So I was like, why don't I just do that as a graduate degree and then see where it takes me? So I remember I came home, I like looked online at all the schools in Canada to see, okay, what kind of research would I want to do? And I found this school or this specific research group at Dalhousie University, and that's on the east coast of Canada. It's in Nova Scotia. And so I remember I sent the PI email telling him how, and this is, mind you, this was in August. Okay.
Yeah.
So I sent the PI an email and I was like, I'm really interested in your research. I would love to get to know more about it. If we could set up maybe like a call so I can talk to you about it. I'm interested in doing my master's with you. And I think within like a week, he replied to me and he called me and we were just talking. And then he was like, okay, well, how about I fly you over and you can give like a mini presentation and we'll see if you're a good fit for our group. So like a week after that, I flew to Nova Scotia, which is maybe like a 2 to 3 hour flight. Flew there. And I did my presentation, all went well. We liked each other. I liked the group, liked the research. And he was like, great, we can have you on board then for that September. And so mind you, this is still in August and he wants me to come out in September. And I hadn't even gotten accepted into the school as well. So I remember he helped me with that. He helped me write like a recommendation letter, and I had to write my letter of intent. And then within a week again, I got accepted to the school, got accepted to the program, flew down. I had to move everything in like 2 weeks span. And luckily we had family friends that lived there. So I lived with them for a while until I found a place. So within a month, I decided I wanted to do my master's, found a place, got accepted, and moved. So it was super last minute, super busy.
Damn.
Yeah. And so during my master's, I loved the research. Everything was great. But in my mind, I still wanted to be a dentist. This was just kind of like a passing by kind of thing, a step to get me towards where I want to be. And so during my master's, I rewrote the entry test to get into dental school. And I remember it was like the best results I've ever gotten before. And I applied again for the following year, but then I didn't get in again. And I applied to like all the schools in Canada. And again, I got no interview, no acceptance letter, nothing. So if you can imagine, I'm like, okay, the only reason why I'm here doing a graduate degree is because of dental school.
Yeah.
Like, it's not even something I really want to pursue. And remember, I was just so distraught because I was like, okay, like literally, what am I going to do? I have no other plan. So after I graduated from my master's, I came back home and I was trying to find a job with a master's degree in chemistry and couldn't find anything. And I wasn't even like restricting myself. I was looking all around Canada and I couldn't find anything, to the point where I had a master's degree and I ended up working at Starbucks and teaching piano for like 8 months with a master's degree. Yeah. So again, it was a period where I was just so lost. I didn't even know what I wanted to do. I didn't even know what my next steps were. And I was also tutoring during that time. So I was on campus a lot. the campus that I did my undergrad. And so I remember I was there once and I went to go just say hi to one of the profs that I did a co-op position with. And he was very, very friendly. Like, I remember we got along very well when I was doing my co-op position. So I just went to go drop by and say hi. And so when I saw him, we were just talking. He was asking like what I was up to and everything in my life. So I told him kind of like my life and what I was doing, how I did a master's. I finished it, couldn't find a job. And then he was like, oh, well, what do you think about doing your PhD? And mind you, prior to that, like if you knew me, I would always say I'm never doing a PhD. It's just like, you want me, like me to spend another 4 years of my life in school. After like the 10 plus years I've already spent in school, right? So I was just like, no, it's not happening. But he was talking about his research. I was like, oh, that's very interesting. And the thing with my supervisor is like, he's so persuasive, like super, like he knows how to sell. So the way he was just selling the idea to me, and I was like, oh, you know, maybe this PhD thing could be a thing. And so I remember after I talked to him, I went back, I talked to my parents, and then they were like, yeah, well, you know, it's a good idea. And, you know, every African parent wants their child to be a doctor. So obviously they weren't going to shut the idea down. So I thought about it some more. And then I was like, okay, well, I'm literally not doing anything productive with my life. So why not? You know, so I kind of went into the PhD with an attitude of, okay, well, why not? We'll see where it takes me. And yeah, here I am today. And I actually love it. Like, it's probably the best decision that I've made, because like, I've never thought that it would take me in this route of like having your independence to have your creativity with research, first of all, right? And it's just opened so many doors. And I've just been connecting with people like you and, you know, Black women that are doing their PhD and building that community. And yeah, I love it.
Oh, wow, Anna, your whole story, I was like clutching my heart at times. Because what? That is a lot. It's a lot. And and I think it gave me a little bit of goosebumps, because clearly, you know, when the heart wants something and like you really wanted that dentist position, and how it felt for me as you were telling that story, how it must have been.
But I would say the one thing I want to point out too is that like the trajectory of me going to grad school and doing my PhD was so easy. Like, when I tell you, I never applied for anything. I didn't apply to my master's. I just got accepted. I didn't even submit an application for my PhD. It was even just through a conversation, you know, that I got admitted and everything. Like, it was just so easy. But then look at me trying to get into dental school, you know, like the most difficult thing ever. So like knowing that and seeing that happen in my life just kind of proved that, you know, when something is for you, it's for you. Like you don't even need to try. You don't even need to put in effort. Like doors are just going to open, you know, if it's where you're supposed to be.
Precisely. And I think sometimes as humans, depending on your religious belief, we tend to fight a lot of things and we tend to force things. And then divine intervention is like, nah, that is not for you, my dear. And then all of the things like you think you don't want, and the things that are not for you kind of just happen with ease. And it's so beautiful how it happened. But I think it's also pretty important to point out that one's journey does not necessarily end. I mean, in terms of one thing that I really like that you touched on was that employment issue. You know, there's so many graduates who have these wonderful degrees, who have their honors or they have their masters. And it's just unfortunate that even in the economy, I'm speaking, for example, in South Africa's economy, it's hard to be employed. You never thought you would do, because you're like, I just went through a whole master's to do this.
I worked my butt off to sit back and work at Starbucks.
But there's nothing wrong with that. Yeah, but I also think it's important that to have that humbling thing, that sometimes you kind of need to go through these sorts of life things to kind of teach you life lessons. And, maybe you needed to be at Starbucks, and maybe you needed to be that piano teacher, So I always say, like, things happen for a reason. Of course, in that moment, it doesn't make sense and it's awful and it's depressing. But yeah, I totally feel you. And it's so beautiful how these people came into your life and helped you, like for your master's and for your PhD. So clearly you are meant to be Dr. Anna, and your parents are going to get that doctor, not as a dentist, but as a chemist. So either way, it's going to happen. So on that note, we are here at your PhD, which your supervisor sold you really well. Shout out to him.
He snaked me into it.
Shout out to him. So just to quickly mention to everybody, your research focuses on synthesizing small molecule carbohydrates for the purpose of decreasing cell damage during cryopreservation. So now this is so interesting because, I mean, anybody who watches sci-fi movies finds what you're doing so interesting. So to somebody who doesn't know what cryopreservation is, can you start there and then tell us more about your studies?
Yeah, so cryopreservation is the process of preserving life under low temperatures. And so from sci-fi movies, I'm sure everyone thinks about it as like freezing the human body.
Yeah.
and like preserving your life. And then 200 years later, you can thaw yourself. And yeah, so we're not at that stage yet. There's a long way to go until we get there, if we do get there. But right now, we're trying to master at the cellular level and tissue level and organ level. So cell, tissue, and organ preservation is a huge field in medicine, just simply for like different transplants, right? So like say if you need a new set of kidneys or a new set of lungs, if someone's organ, obviously sometimes it has to be preserved for a certain period of time, which can either be for a couple hours or it can be for a day, a week, or so on and so on. And the way that usually it's preserved is under low temperatures. And low temperatures can either be in a refrigerator, so -4 or -80 or -196. And typically for long preservation times, it has to be preserved under lower temperatures. So like -196, which is the temperature of liquid nitrogen.
Or is this in Fahrenheit or degrees Celsius?
Oh, in degrees Celsius, sorry.
Yeah.
So at very low temperatures. But the thing with that is, if you think of just freezing like anything, obviously there's ice buildup, right? And there's this process called ice recrystallization. When you have larger crystals grow larger at the expense of smaller crystals. And so this happens when you have, when you freeze something and also when you thaw it as well. And so the larger and larger the crystals get, it's been found that it can actually damage the biological molecules. So if it's a cell, tissue, or organ, it can end up damaging it. And so what we're trying to do in our lab is to make these small molecules, which we have made many before and that work very well in cell preservation, different types of cells. Like we worked with stem cells, hematopoietic stem cells, T cells, also red blood cells. And we found that these small molecules that we made that are carbohydrate based can end up decreasing the size of ice crystals, and therefore there's less damage to the biological molecule after you thaw. And so once you thaw your sample, you have more viable cells.
That it's so interesting that your lab is doing this work. You mentioned that for all of us who thought all of these movies that we watch, we're not there at the human body level, but we have to start at these smaller cells. Where would they use it?
My specific project, I'm focusing on red blood cells. And so it's pretty much used for blood donation. There's a huge issue where I don't know if it's the same with where you are, but in Canada, there's a huge issue with having enough blood supply for blood transfusions. And constantly we're trying to get people to donate blood. And so that solves one of the issues. But another issue is when we have all that blood supply, how are we going to preserve it? And how are we going to how are we going to have enough viable blood cells to do transplants? And so that's kind of what we're tackling. And so some of these molecules that we do make, they're used in conjunction with different cryo additives that you use to freeze the sample of blood. So for example, say if you give blood, right, and you donate blood and they keep it in like a little, I guess there's a name for it, I can't remember the name, but those little blood sacks. What they could do is that it's mixed with a cryo additive. And so the cryo additive typically to freeze blood is glycerol, but then glycerol doesn't prevent against ice recrystallization. So that's where our molecules come into play, where we supplement the glycerol with our molecules so that once we thaw the blood, there's going to be less damage to the cells and you'll have a higher cell viability.
Oh my gosh, this is mind-blowing. And it's, I love it. It makes a lot of sense. And I'm just thinking in terms of, for example, here in Africa, right, where I spoke to you earlier about how electricity is such a problem, number one. Would it be, in terms of the research that you guys are doing, do you think, is it too expensive to be made like more accessible to, let's say, like a smaller clinic which doesn't have all of that infrastructure? Is it too soon to be implemented?
Yeah, so we're at a more research base, but my supervisor, very, very wise man, he actually started his own company. And he takes these molecules that we synthesize that work very, very well with different cell types, and he sells them to different companies, I guess you can say. That it's something that it's mainstream right now, but I think it is just used for research. But I think now it's being integrated into being used for medical purposes as well. But like you said, it is very expensive, obviously.
Yeah, it sounds expensive.
Because it's something that right now it's rare, and it's not something that is made at like to a high level and to a high degree. And so, yeah, I would say that it's probably something that there's a lot of room to grow, first of all.
Yeah.
And it's a very small niche. Like our research, there's only a few people that are doing it, a very, very small niche. So I think until it becomes more mainstream, you're not really gonna, like, it's not going to be something that is used that often.
But I think when it does, when you guys have figured it out properly and it does blow, it's very important research. It sounds a little bit more like biology, sort of, or life sciences, you know? So I like this chemistry because I ran away from chemistry.
So that's the one thing that I like too. It's because chemistry can be so applicable. And I love chemistry when it's applicable to like different biological outlets, right? So like we're doing like cell preservation or even just like drug synthesis too. It's still chemistry, but biologically relevant.
Oh, fantastic work that you guys are doing, and I can't wait to see how it further develops. So, apart from your research, which is really exciting, you're currently working on something else that's exciting, your own individual outreach project, which you plan to host in Ghana, where you are of Ghanaian descent. I don't think you mentioned that earlier. So you want to host it in Ghana for women in STEM or that are either an undergrad or graduate level, even young professionals. So can you please tell us more about this wonderful idea of yours?
Yeah, so this is a new project that I'm starting. This is actually maybe the first time I'm publicly speaking about it.
Yeah.
But it's something that it's just been on my heart to do for probably a couple years. And, quarantine was actually a blessing because I actually had time to really sit down and like plan out my thoughts and plan out exactly what I wanted to do. And finally, like I've started planning, and hopefully my goal is for next year to do this workshop that I'm planning to do. And so the goal of this workshop simply is to equip women with skills necessary to thrive in different STEM fields. And these skills are not necessarily skills that are taught in school, but skills that I found that myself, just going through STEM, I had to learn on my own. And some of it was difficult to learn, right? So skills such as how to write a good research paper, write a research proposal, how to do science communication, you know, because that's something that it's a huge field these days, how to communicate science properly to the public so they understand it. Also different skills like career building skills, entrepreneurship in STEM, like that kind of stuff. And so I wanted to bring that workshop to Ghana because just the science scene in Ghana, I know, is booming. It's growing. And just encouraging, and there's a huge wave of just trying to encourage women to go into STEM at a young age, right? And that's great. The outreach program is great for women to go into STEM at a young age. But the one thing that I think can keep people in STEM is when you have the skills to sustain yourself in STEM. Because a lot of times I find that people shy away from different programs and different fields because they feel like they don't have what it takes or they think it's difficult, right? But if you're able to equip yourself enough and you know that, okay, I have these set of skills that will help me to thrive in STEM and help me to do well, then there's going to be nothing that stops you from reaching or going to the top, you know? So yeah, so that's just something that it's been on my heart for a while and still in the planning stages. But yeah, I plan to do this workshop next year and to make it a yearly thing that happens in Ghana for women in STEM.
That's fantastic. And I like how you noted that, you know, the quarantine birthed a lot of projects. I think just the idea that one person, you have to sit. And also, I truly believe in that thing, that there's always that thing on your heart that you always know that you want to do, and it keeps on creeping. I think you can attest to that. It just always keeps on creeping. Because I know for me, it was this podcast. I didn't know it would be this podcast, but it was something like this. I just didn't know what it was yet. Sometimes it's not really clear. And I think it's the same for you, that there's always just something that you want to do, and I'm glad that you're doing. And speaking of that, of your project and how you want to go to Ghana and do this, I do think it's important for Africans in the diaspora to come back and, for example, host these workshops or come back and give back to their communities in their home countries. Do you think that is, what is your view on that?
I'm all for that, 100%. I'm all for never forget where you came from, you know, and never forget that you have a community to give back to as well. Like, I feel like our sole purpose of being here is just to learn what we can and to share our knowledge with the world or with people that don't have access to that type of knowledge. And obviously here in the Western world, we're more privileged to have a lot more resources, right? Especially when it comes to science. We have a lot more resources, a lot more equipment, you know, our research, like even just like our research capacity is larger here. So why not take what we learn and bring it back and help a population that doesn't have what we have? So yeah, I'm all for that because like Ghana and Africa in general, like there's so many natural resources to the point where I feel like the science, like if Africa had the same amount of, I guess, access to like different equipment and just like a different structure, like the science field in Africa would just be booming because of the natural resources that we have, you know? And so I'm all for, you know, taking what I'm learning and bringing it back and building whatever I can in Africa, just so that it can thrive just like we're thriving here.
And just to play devil's advocate here, I know that sometimes people at home, or for example here in Africa, there's that term that you have, that whole savior approach, where people from the West, particularly white people, come in and they say, oh no, we want to help you do A, B, C, D, E, F, G. And I think I was listening to another podcast where they call it like helicopter research, where they're just like there, but they're not really doing anything. So do you think it's better that you have Africans to actually come in, because you'd think that we know more than somebody who just comes here for the vibes and for the pictures?
No, I completely agree. Just to speak on that, so during my undergrad, I went on a trip. It's with Global Medical Brigade. It's a group that I don't know if you heard of it, but it's a group that goes to different third world countries, and they help with like the healthcare system. Not even really help with the healthcare system, but they provide like necessary healthcare for maybe like a couple days, and they provide like dental care for a couple days, and then after that they just leave. And I remember I went on that trip and it was a great experience, but then I came back and I was thinking like, okay, but like what did we actually do?
The lasting approach. I think
we gave them toothbrushes, but like we literally put a Band-Aid on the situation. And so I agree, like I also don't like that whole savior approach where you just go to a third world country, you do like a little 1-2-1-2, put a Band-Aid on the situation, take some pictures, and like you think you saved the world. I don't like that. And so that's why I'm more of the, okay, let's go and equip the people there with what they need to help grow their economy, to help grow their institutions, because me coming there for like a week and helping people, or like, I don't even know, but me coming there for a week and putting a Band-Aid on the situation isn't going to do anything. But if I can be a continuous help, and if I can equip the people with the knowledge that they need, change their mindset so they can think a certain way, so that they can build up whatever field they're in to thrive, then I feel like that has more of a lasting effect than going there and providing a few toothbrushes. Not to throw shade on the institutions and like the different organizations that do that kind of stuff. I mean, it's still a lot of help, and I'm sure people are still thankful that you have people that come over there and provide them with things that they need. But I'm more of a long-term person of, okay, how can this be a long-term fix for the problems that are occurring in that part of the world?
Yeah, no, I hear you. But I think shade should be thrown sometimes, because like, how long has this been happening? Again, the issue is not that, for example, that these people don't know, or they are uneducated, or it's rather, how can we help you with what you have? How can we make it better? Or rather, how can we amplify what you have for longer lasting? Not to come in and say, oh no, what you're doing is wrong, this is what you're doing. And also another thing is that when organizations or people come in, you come in with ideas that are working in the West, right? But you don't really come in and ask, what are the people actually doing? Because even if the science is not up to par with the sciences, they're still doing the sciences. It's not that they're not doing the sciences, right? That's why I'm saying that I think sometimes it's important to throw the shade a little bit, because when you come in with that savior approach, you don't take into consideration that these people have been doing this, or they are doing this, and they are not producing. So I think the issue is, imagine what they can do when you give them more added and for a longer period. So I think that's why I agree that you coming in and going for the long haul. Just to wrap it up, given where you are, and also just listening to your journey, because your journey, wow, so inspirational. What advice would you give to somebody who wants to get into the field of STEM generally, but also into your field, and also just given your story, because Anna, your story is flipping amazing. So just some last few words.
Yeah, what I would say is if you feel like you want to go into STEM, keep your eye on the end game, because literally that's the only thing that has gotten me through, is like what exactly I want to do in this world. and if what exactly you want to do in this world, and you have to, and for what you have to do in this world, if you have to go through a STEM route, then you're going to need to keep your eyes on that, because STEM is just like it's tough. Like they're not easy courses at all. They're really not easy. Like there's so many times that I wanted to give up. I remember my first year of my PhD, I had no results. Like I have nothing to show for it, like nothing at all. And so the only thing that actually kept me going was like my end game, like exactly like what I wanted to do. And so I would say that definitely it's a journey. It's a journey that has a lot of ups and downs, and sometimes it's not going to be easy, but if you know exactly why you're there and you know exactly where it's going to lead you to, then that's the one thing that will help you get through.
Yeah, it's true. Nothing is ever easy, and I think just keep on reminding yourself the why. The why of what you're doing and where you want to be. And despite, I think another thing is that we must normalize opening up that, hey, like you said, there's going to be a year can go by, like months, like a year. And also, I mean, if anything, this pandemic has also taught us that, hey, will come. So we just have to keep on keeping on. And just thank you so much for being so open and honest and sharing us more about your journey, and also just exciting research that you're doing. Thank you so much for coming on. It was really great having you.
And thank you so much for having me.
I had a really good time. And for everybody else who's listening, thank you so much for tuning into another episode of the Root of the Science podcast with your girl, Anne with an E. Until next time, goodbye.